3, 2, and 1. Hi everyone, and welcome to Digital Twin Week. My name is Adam Beck. I'm Executive Director of the Smart Cities Council for Australia and New Zealand, and I'm delighted to introduce and bring to you and host day 4 of Digital Twin Week. We're going to talk about digital twin maturity today, and we've got a great panel that's going to be facilitated by our co-hosts, Oricon. I've got a few notes to go through before we get into the dialogue. So just bear with me for a moment. What I would like to do is highlight that today is going to be our busiest day at Digital Twin Week. We have 4 sessions today. After this session now, we've got everything from digital twins and greenfields and regional areas to data sharing. We have guests talking about rail crossing projects, water projects. Later on this afternoon, we'll also be heading back over to the UK like we did last night. We're going to hear from Highways England, High Speed Rail. We'll be going back to New Zealand, talking to the NZ Transport Agency, among many others. So it's a great program we have lined up today. And of course, don't forget that we have our Digital Twin Strategy workshop tomorrow. We're currently co-creating with industry and government a Australian-New Zealand digital twin strategy. It's open source, and we'd love you to be part of that session tomorrow. Head to digitaltwinweek.com for further information on the program. Just some housekeeping. Today's session, we're very much encouraging you to use the questions function that you have there in your control panel. Pop any questions in. Kerry will be dipping into those throughout the session. And of course, for anyone that wants to go back and replay this session, or indeed recommend it to a peer or a colleague, it'll be available on our YouTube channel this time tomorrow, or indeed head to the Digital Twin Hub. That's the best place to go to. You'll see and find all of our recordings of Digital Twin Week up there, along with a whole host of other resources, articles, and that's where we're really bringing the community together around digital twin in the Australia-New Zealand region. We announced yesterday that in 2021, we'll be launching the Digital Twin Challenge. If you head to the Digital Twin Hub, you'll find a little bit more information about that. It'll launch in March next year, but we're taking registrations of interest for those that may be interested in being involved. So please head to the Hub to find out more information about the Digital Twin Challenge for next year. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Kerry. She'll introduce our guests, Will, Andy, and Carl, coming to us from all parts of the world today, Australia, New Zealand, and Helsinki. So looking forward to this session. We've got a great audience. Kerry, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thanks so much for co-hosting with us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. So hopefully you can all hear me all right, and in a minute you'll be able to see us all. As Adam said, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and a really brief introduction to myself and to the session before I hand it over to the rest of the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the questions. So I've prepared a few questions just as a sort of starter topics, and let's see where the conversation takes us from there. So just a brief introduction, as I said. So my name's Kerry Niven. I'm the Digital Practice Leader for Oricon New Zealand, coming at you from Christchurch this morning. If you can see out the window, it's a beautiful day here. I've been involved in working with digital technology for a very long time now, and those of you who know me will know that what I'm particularly interested in is the human aspects of technology, and how we can interact with it, how we can leverage technology to become better at what we do, and what the experiences are of people who use the sorts of technology and tools that we create. So really excited about this session this morning, and it's to talk about digital twin maturity, and whether it's a measure of humans or technology, or a mixture of both. So just as some background, at the State of the Nation session on Monday, we suggested that in general, most asset owners are some way along their journey of creating a digital twin or twins. And what we wanted to do today was to take a deeper look at the concept of maturity. So what actually is it? How's it defined? How's it measured? And how's it achieved? So just for example, maturity is often measured in terms of an index. So that describes progressive steps in digitisation or technology adoption. But what about the maturity of the organisation within which it's implemented? And what about the impact on its people? How can they work with these new systems, and how can they make a switch to an information-driven asset? Similarly, can we have a think about supply chains? Are they equipped to respond to increasingly sophisticated requirements from their clients? Can they accommodate fundamental implications, such as moving to model-first environments, designing, collaborating and verifying in real time, and creating standardised information assets? There are all sorts of questions that quite often fall along the wayside as we get fixated on the technology aspects of digital twin implementation. So this is the real the drive behind this conversation this morning. My three guests, as Adam mentioned, we have Will Hackney, Director of Digital Enablement at Oricon, Andy Lyon, Program Director, Digital Engineering at Keyrail, and Carl Fitzpatrick, BIM Manager of the Infrastructure Team in Auckland Airport. And all three of these people have had a lot to do with the journeys that their respective organisations and organisations they've worked with in terms of progression towards a digital twin. So with that, thanks very much for joining us all, and I'll pass you over and get you to introduce yourselves. Let's start at the top with you, Will.
Thanks, Kerry.
Cool, go ahead.
Cool. Welcome, everyone. I just briefly, so in my role with Oricon, I've really, for the last number of years, I've helped line up what we do in the design and engineering space, and the taking a more unified approach. Previously to that, very much, I've been very closely aligned to development and implementation of a lot of the standards around information management. So gained a lot of insights from time back in the UK, working with Vinci Construction, and then just post the UK construction strategy, moving to Transport for London, to help them align to the UK BIM Level 2 agenda, which, so in terms of maturity of these types of things, that's certainly given me some interesting insights previously. And now very much, I think as a trend, we're realizing that clients have such a significant role to play in moving industry, as well as their own businesses. So very much leading up our assisting clients, asset owners and operators in, I guess, achieving a more unified approach and working with their suppliers as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Will. Welcome on board. Next in order, we have Andy. Good morning, Andy. Thanks for joining.
Morning, Kerry. Thanks for having me. So Andy Lyon, I'm Program Director of Digital Engineering at Keyrail. It's a relatively new role in our business and new team in our business, so it's only just being stood up now. So I've been responsible for the BIM pilot that Keyrail's been running for the last couple of years, and which has very much been a dive in 2 feet first and sort of learn quickly approach, and I think that probably speaks to my own level of maturity in this particular space. I've been passionate about it. I think if you've dialed into this session, you probably have an inner magpie like most of us. So the shiny things are always a sort of attractive and fun. So there's been a bit of a passion for that, but it's not necessarily been anything more than theoretical. I've not done a significant body of work other than what's been happening in the last couple of years. So I think as technology has developed to a point, it's not really the barrier anymore. It's really about kind of jumping in and just having the courage to have a crack. That's been a lot of our learnings over the last 2 years. So be interested to hear what Will and Carl have to say about things.
Brilliant, thanks, Andy. I love that. And the magpie, I just wrote that down. I think we should keep that. Carl, good morning. Very early morning for you.
Yes, so thanks, Kerry, for having me along. My name's Carl Fitzpatrick. I'm the BIM manager at Auckland Airport in New Zealand. However, I've been working remotely the past couple of years from Helsinki, Finland, and the reason for that is my wife is Finnish, and we found out we're having real twins, and so we ended up migrating back to Finland. But my role has sort of been an interesting one because I started out in architecture, studied in New Zealand. Then I moved to Finland and worked as an architect for 6 or 7 years, and started working on larger projects such as hospitals. So they were sort of over 80,000 square meters or larger. And that sort of journey made me discover that there was a lot of information that from the design side of the equation we were sitting on, but the client wasn't that interested in it at that point in time. So I sort of started looking for clients that might be interested in actually taking that data and doing something with it. And that's where I came across Auckland Airport back in my homeland. And so took the opportunity, applied there, and have spent the last 3 years sort of basically integrating BIM into the already existing GIS program, which in some ways you could argue is a digital twin, and BIM has just been adding that 3D aspect and a more detailed view of the building. So that's where my focus has been, merging in with that existing team and then seeing where I can add value from my architecture background and understanding buildings and construction, and how we can use that to improve the ongoing operations of the terminal, as well as using the information to help with our future design and construction projects.
Wow, that is fascinating. I didn't realise that you had an architecture background. It's that's made me think of a whole new set of questions around the consumers of the digital twin, the end users. So, you know, we've talked previously about whether or not that's related to maturity in terms of, are you moving from the capture of the information to create your digital twin to increasing the maturity of that digital twin? And maybe it is my first question of the morning, is the next step on from there actually understanding who you're building the digital twin for and what their experience of it might be?
Yeah, I guess like, I can jump in on that one first. Like when you're working as an architect, you're producing this data set, you're working with all the engineers and the contractors, and you're building this picture up of the building, and you just want to give that to the client and say, hey, there's all this data that we could provide you, but they're just asking for 2D plans, and that's what they want. That's how they want to view the data. So I think in some ways there's like a whole lot of maturity sitting out there in the world, but a lot of clients haven't actually picked on to engaging with them properly to be able to get that data out the end and make it useful. Because if you just produce that during design and for construction, but you don't actually through construction verify it, then it kind of becomes somewhat useless to the client beyond. So there needs to be a real like ownership of the data at some point in time across the full life cycle, so that the next person can benefit from it. And I think you need to realize like that you don't know who the next person could be. So it's like, if we all did our jobs right for what we needed, then there's always the possibility that it could be passed on.
I think this is, Kerry, we had a session a little while back. It was kind of around total quality management and kind of that where you sit in a big system. And that's one of the, like Carl, what you said there, a couple of parts to it that resonate with me. And one of the points is I like the idea of the digital twin. You start to aggregate and federate a whole bunch of data all into the one place, and that unlocks a sort of picture of the bigger system that you sit within. Quite often the people don't understand the bigger system that they sit within. So maybe the digital twin will help people kind of get that perspective. But I think if you don't understand what the cog next to you is doing, what you think might be good for you might not quite be right for the other one. And I've found on a few of our projects as well that we start the job off with the end in mind, saying this is the asset that we're trying to create. We want this asset information, and don't really give enough consideration to the designers have their own needs, and we need to create information that works for them, and we need to set the construction information requirements as well. So everybody that's part of that information chain for an asset kind of has to have their voice heard at the very beginning of the job. It's just can be tricky to do that because you haven't always got all the parties in the room. And yeah, I don't know if maybe once we have a whole big set of data, that will help. That'll help people sort of articulate them.
Yeah, it's almost, how do you start with the end in mind when you're not completely certain what the end looks like?
Yeah.
And you know what that big picture could become, you know, as you're creating that picture. And it actually leads me to one of the questions that I was going to ask you, Andy. So looking at the creation of the digital twin through a design and construction project, and knowing a little bit about that project, so there were some quite unexpected outcomes that you were able to take advantage of through the digital approach that you took. Would you mind explaining just a little bit around how that came to be?
Yeah, so we like I said at the start, we not particularly mature. 2 years ago, we just jumped in and went, and now we do BIM. So really the effort on our projects went into making sure the people that were part of the project teams, well, I guess the kind of people that, when you throw a problem at them, there's not a sort of throw your arms up in the air and, no, it's the people that are like, well, I guess we could do this or this or this. So people that are really keen to solve problems and work on it. So we wanted to build a team mentality that was going to take advantage of the sort of opportunity and create that empowerment in the team to kind of just go and do cool stuff. So, we said we have an idea of how we can start the design process and build the models. We're not really sure what's going to happen in the construction space, so we'll need to get somebody in that can really work with us on getting the most out of it. So yeah, we prepared data that was in our particular format, and I think was kind of agnostic enough that it was a good foundation to start from. But just having everything in the one place, it's unlocked a few initiatives. So I think there was a safety and design initiative that the Oricon team led, which was using eye tracking for with school kids using level crossings, and it was a really cool way to see the world from a different person's point of view. And then another one was around machine avoidance. So we've got all the excavators on site. You can log into them through the online portal and see what designs they're building and see the real-time as-built that they're producing. We're taking that and with a couple of extra sensors and some smart people, now we've got an excavator that knows where it is and knows what it's building, but also it knows where it's not allowed to be. So we set up shields to prevent them from coming across into the rail corridor. And it was something that, I think it was innovation that was just born out of the right environment. So it really comes down to the power of the team. I think if you've got the wrong team, you're never going to get the right data or the best outcome. So you've got to really put your effort into getting the people in a position where they are properly empowered to kind of roll with it. And I think you have to accept that or welcome failure and say, they'll have some good ideas and some really bad ideas, and that's okay. We want to get all of them on the table because there might be one absolute gem in there that saves us a whole chunk of money. And
The other thing is really good that as a client, you're creating that pull interaction with your construction teams and what's happening on site. And I think to the first question as well, Kerry, around what does the digital twin mean to different parties? If you just look at it from a leveraging technology and information, from a main contractor perspective, a design engineering supplier, an asset owner operator, the way technology and data is leveraged is very different because their businesses are very different, their priorities and drivers are very different. So recognizing that's really key. But again, as the point that Andy made around that agnostic aspect, but also making sure data is the bit that can be transferred, that's relevant, that's useful and valuable, and a lot of that's through collaboration. So again, it's really good, looking at what Kiwi Rail and Auckland Airport are doing is that collaborative part with themselves and their supply chain. I think that's starting to unravel some of those answers.
I think the one key thing around the data is like with the word BIM, there's a lot of obsession around the 3D model aspect. And like one thing you discover when you're working with BIM and GIS alongside each other is like you might have a whole lot of data, and then you might have a point in GIS or a line or a polygon, and then you've got a 3D model element as well. And it's like the point and the 3D model element are just placeholders for you to access that data and put it to a location. And so it's like, I think we get too hung up on creating this very detailed 3D aspect, and then we have all this data, but it's like the moment that you delete that model, all the data's gone. So in terms of maturity, it's like, does that data sit somewhere that if someone mistakenly deletes a model element, have you lost the data or not? So it's like, having, and that's where I'd say it would be mature, is that you have a database where it's all time-stamped and it knows when it was changed and what the previous state was. And then you can create a GIS point or a polygon, or you can have a LOD 100 model element and an LOD 500 element, but it's all just pulling the same piece of data. So in terms of maturity, just having it in a model element is sort of slightly more mature than having it on a noted 2D plan. So,
we had a catch up with Graham from Queensland Rail the other day, and it was an interesting take. He said, I think the analogy he used was doctor goes to see a patient, and on the tablet he's got every bit of information about that patient and what medication they're on and what tests they've had and what their history's been. That's the digital twin. Doesn't need a 3D body scan of the patient. If he wants that, speak to the patient that's sitting right in front of you, but it's all of that rich data that's actually the most valuable part of the digital twin, and its visual proxies, useful context, but certainly when you're getting into the asset management end of things, it's actually it's the information in the back end that's the powerful piece by that point in time.
It's a really interesting way of looking at it, because I think, Carl, when you were describing that process, I'm thinking that's the digital twin protecting itself from the human maturity levels of the people who are interacting with it. You know, you're putting safeguards into the technology just in case. And I guess it leads on to, I've got a couple of questions which I'm keeping on the side of the screen, and this is the first one is there a misalignment in our human maturity and technology/data maturity? And I'm thinking, so looking at our experience of working with Auckland Airport, you know, we were so impressed with the maturity of your systems and the thinking that's been put into the approach and the design and the technology. And I'm interested in your thoughts around the challenges of what came first? Was it the bringing all the people around to discuss that process, or was it building the technology and then convincing the people, or a mixture of both?
From us, it's been like, well, I always present a slide where I start with paper and then work my way through to digital twins and talking about paper-based information management, file-based information management, data-based information management, and then a digital twin where you're starting to connect multiple databases to each other. And I think at the airport, it started well before my time, where they, you know, there was a shed that had to get pulled down and that had all the paper documents in it. So it was like, okay, we've got to take these away. What should we do? We'll throw out the ones we don't need and keep the ones we do, and we'll scan them and put them onto a server. And then it's like, okay, this isn't that efficient. Let's turn the documents into CAD documents that we still need. And then it was like, the next step was, okay, let's put this into GIS and build that database around the data. And then it's like, okay, now we can publish apps to the business where they can actually start interacting with that data. We can start to have people inputting data from the field from a mobile device. And then the next step is, okay, we have these buildings, let's understand them better, let's get them mapped and modeled in detail, and then let's start to combine those data sets and connect it to the wider business system. So it's really a natural evolution of just, okay, what's next? And not like, I see too many people going out and like, I want to procure a digital twin. And it's like, as you say, what is a digital twin? And I think you need to just look at yourself or look at the business and go, okay, how do we manage information now? And what would be the best way to start doing it now, and then like build up from that, rather than trying to just jump all the way to the end, even when we don't know what the end is. So just like be patient and take the steps, just the same way that I watch my real twins grow up. They, you know, it takes time for them to learn how to behave.
I think you make a really good point there around that. You know, there's a lot of talk around data management. I think that's been seen through the sessions this week, and the example you talked about there, almost you don't, in a cultural and a capability perspective, the data management, information management is still a challenge. I think it's always been a challenge for businesses, and getting, you know, individuals aware and comfortable around their interaction and their role around whether it's a document, whether it's, you know, data, actually taking small iterative steps to build that capability takes time and it's difficult. But I think that's why, you know, your point earlier, Andy, around just getting stuck in is also very valuable to start things moving and to get people exploring what it means to them and how it fits within a business. So it's, yeah, I think iterative steps are key.
I think you got to make it tangible as well. Like that's one of the things I found at the beginning is this, like the theoretical side of it can become a bit mysterious and maybe a little bit of a barrier to some people. So a little bit of something they can kind of hold on to and see and sort of understand, oh, okay, you know, and sometimes that's a little bit of the shiny toy. This is a little bit of what you might have. Like it helps people just to interact with it a bit more, I think, and bring it into the real world for themselves. So it is I think it is a bit of a to and fro process.
Yeah, it also takes a long time. In a big building like ours, it takes a long time to get the shiny tool as well, because you don't just go out. You don't go out tomorrow and model up an entire airport. Yep. It takes time, and money.
Do I wonder if it's aligned to a question that I'm looking at on the side, which is, are you saying that it has to be value driven? So the progression or any movement towards greater maturity of digital twins has to be aligned to value. So who is the value being created for? Something like, what are the questions that we can answer that we couldn't before? And through this direct investment, what are the benefits that we're providing? Is that almost what you're suggesting?
Yeah, 100%. I think at the airport, it's a perfect example where we have so many different customers, as we call, or like to think of them, who are actually our colleagues working for the airport. But we have BIM managers and GIS managers, we also have people like wildlife managers and people manage a person whose job is to track mosquitoes. So you have like this wide range of different people doing different jobs, and they all have a data management problem. And it's sort of like, with us being in the business, we listen to those problems and say, okay, actually we have a tool that could save some time. Could we do a proof of concept? And it's like, because we're within the business, we can quickly whip up, particularly with GIS BIM, we need to get a bit more mature and more tools available, but it's really easy to whip up a tool and have someone test it out and then develop it further and see if it actually saves time. So I think like wildlife management and mosquito management or mosquito tracking for biosecurity purposes has been like a huge time saver through the use of technology and just better information management.
I think it's a real human challenge in that, because if you look at an environmental team with their priorities, I think one of the things is around just functioning businesses, understanding the needs of others to form that purpose. I still think we can't neglect the fact that's quite difficult when you look at these large complex businesses that are compartmentalized for good reason to help manage them efficiently. That in itself could become a barrier to create the connectivity. And I guess the new roles we've seen in industry are helping to break through that to some extent, to identify the shared purpose and get people talking that perhaps wouldn't normally, because they're focused on their priority or firefighting, so to speak. So I think that's sort of that hidden sort of human enabling piece that we're seeing, and I think needs to be continued and accelerated a bit more, so that the connectivity that's probably people are seeing keep going down that trajectory and getting people talking. So less around, here's some new disruptive technology, because it has a place once that purpose has been mutually understood, but getting those conversations flowing and growing onto better things. So.
I think sometimes getting the money flowing to then pay for it. Like, there's so many good initiatives, but they're often in parts of the business that just like cripplingly underfunded, or it really prevents things from moving forward. And then you have, like I know for Kiro, we've got a massive portfolio of capital works. So you have this big bang part of the business that's suddenly spending a lot of money. So the opportunity is there to go, like, this is the time to jump on the bandwagon. So you have to kind of demonstrate that, hey, actually, all of the value, we're delivering all of this value for a construction job. So we need to kind of tailor it to that. But we're going to use that to try and transform the other parts of the business that, if you try and put a return on investment case up for certain initiatives, they'll never get there. But if you can implement it through a capital works program, then all those other small incremental benefits aren't trying to justify their own existence. You've kind of paid for it over here and then derived all that benefit.
I mean, that's such a key point, because what we see a lot with broad spectrum of clients, where they might get the go to do a pilot or proof of concept, because there's an understanding that there's a lot of risk that needs to be managed and mitigated. But if it's not backed, I guess is the struggle. If it's not backed by a what next and a continuous improvement plan, the impact and learnings from one project to the next, or even back into your broader business again, it can start to become the lost opportunity. So again, keep driving it forwards. Has some results, but getting your business talking, as I'm sure at Carl and yourself, Andy, that's one of the key things, to keep others engaged around what they might do next, around what's coming off projects.
And it's also how you account for the time of the people who are working on the project. So if you can swing it so that it's OPEX, then it frees them up to actually play around a bit more, to test things out. Whereas when it's CapEx, you're kind of having to deliver within that project budget. And I think that's the advantage of our team, is that we're kind of there to help the business and just solve problems on the fly. And when we solve those problems, it builds up more data that can then be used for other things which we never thought of in the first place. So you kind of like develop one data set, and then you're like, oh, we could overlay that with this other data set, and now we can solve this problem that we could never solve easily before. So just like sort of one data step at a time, you gain maturity.
I think the industry has like so many of these initiatives about collaboration, and like the most powerful thing we can kind of do, and I know we're trying to do it with other asset owners, is I don't have to learn the same lessons as you, Carl. I can just take the awesome things that you've learned and apply them and share some of the stuff we've done. And I think that's where, like, if we want to build a digital twin of a country, if we want New Zealand's digital twin, then it's going to probably be derived from data sets that people like you and I are impacting. So if we can share those lessons as well, it's going to make it a little bit cheaper and a little bit easier to sort of start to gather that information together.
It's a really interesting point, Will, that you raised just before, and now it's a question back to you, Andy and Carl. So, Will, you're suggesting that a continuous improvement plan or program for continuous improvement might be linked inextricably to digital twin maturity. Do you see alignment between those two activities? That's a horrible question.
Oh, so yeah.
Or
I'm sorry, I was
do
reading the bottom question here about training, but
do you think
you go for that one, Andy?
Do you think that a program of continuous improvement that's embedded within your organisation could help drive digital maturity and digital twin maturity? Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. I think like a change management process where you're actually like, showing people how it works and just getting them to play with it. And I think that's something I would like to push more in the airport, is getting more stuff out there so that people can just play with it and not destroy it, but just get comfortable with it. Like get comfortable with using a model to access data, or using an external database to manage data rather than Excel. So it's like just those little things which can be done, but if you just throw them across the whole business all at once and don't build up like the super users or the champions, then you're going to struggle to push it across, because just there won't be the widespread adoption.
And if you really want that if you really want to be continuously improving, you've got to be continuously open and transparent about the things that you're not doing well and that didn't work. You've got to, like, if you try something new and it doesn't work, it's easy to want to hide and go, oh, I thought that was a really good idea, but that example of it wasn't. And I guess that's where, the leadership teams and the businesses need to kind of empower people to fail and share it and celebrate that things have not gone the way we expected. And now we know that the next time we do it, it will be that little bit better. That's probably one of the kind of big parts. It's got to feel like a safe environment for you to fail. Otherwise, you're not going to continuously improve.
Yeah, and I know that on the digital pilots that you've been working on, you've done such robust lessons learned sessions is across the whole supply chain, which you don't see often enough, I don't think. Is there anything stood out in terms of lessons that you'll take into the next program?
Yeah, definitely. The piece about realizing that there are more information requirements than just asset information requirements, and I'd say there's a question from Gary up in there around operator and maintainer. So yeah, I guess it's kind of made us realize it's a big system. We're part of it. And we need to know what every different cog in that system wants. So we need to do a little bit better in that space. One of the other things that kind of picked up as well is when it comes to the collaboration piece, it's sharing information with people. It often comes down to how well you tell the story. So trying to do things that maybe we traditionally threw in a very big, heavy design report that nobody read, and it's really there for a lawyer to pull out if they need to at some point later. Actually would be a hell of a lot more useful as a 60-second video from the designer to say, this is what I've done. Don't put safety and design things in a register, put it in a 60-second clip, because everybody can watch a 60-second video. Like ideas like that, I think we need to adapt the way we communicate, because there's some things about it that just aren't quite working, and I think that's one of the things we found on the pilots, that we need to rethink the way we're communicating, and it comes back to that 3D data piece, trying to get people to stop thinking that 2D drawings are a deliverable or an output. they're not. Like, we don't buy 2D drawings, we buy information, and that's one of the mediums through which it's conveyed to us. But we want to know that the information's right. So I think just having people understand the information is what you're sort of buying, and that you communicate that information in the correct way. There's a couple of sort of woolly sort of high level things. Yeah.
To build on what Andy's just said, I think you touched on something key there, the importance of communication and the way of communicating, gaining understanding. One trend I've seen working for, main contractor, engineering consultant, asset owner, operator, is every business has some enabling practices, whether that's collaborative working, which is pretty key, information management, project management, commercial management, and they're all huge enablers to achieving this, a cohesive data and technology-enabled, outcomes-driven approach. But often a lot of businesses lose sight of asking the question, what's our maturity and continuous improvement around information management, project management, commercial management, supply chain management is a huge one from an owner-operator, contractor perspective. Design management's another one. So I feel it's not as, it is a bit of a wicked problem. It's not what's the digital twin maturity. You can probably assess that as an artifact or an outcome, how it's being leveraged. But back to the businesses that make up the industry, how collaborative and communicative are we? We've got to keep asking ourselves these questions. They're not easy things to measure, but looking at your own businesses, that's a trend we're seeing where helping clients just to understand themselves better, because they've got a lot of smart people, a lot of smart thinking, a lot of legacy knowledge. Just connecting that up a bit better through communication, as Andy pointed out.
Definitely agree with that. And like the information sharing, you see it at the airport, we have tens of projects happening at the same time, and all with different consultants, and sometimes the same consultants and different project types, but they all overlap and interact in some way. And it's like sharing information at that level across projects can be a bit of a minefield as well. And I think that's something that we're still really working on, how we can manage information at a program level better. And then that feeds down to helping the individual projects better, which then helps us getting better data out the back end as well. So it's always a work in progress.
It's addressing one of the earlier questions around looking at the information requirements and who drives them and how are they included, and how do you measure whether they are successful and actually whether they're relevant. Well, you make me wonder around, do we actually take enough or pay enough attention to the fact that across the supply chain there might be hugely varying levels of digital maturity, and can we actually use our our projects or our capital programs to raise the maturity across the supply chain, and is communication actually one of the really key mediums for doing that? So might we make progress towards digital twins? And Andy, you mentioned national digital twins. Do you think it's a collaborative effort? So we all need to raise the maturity together.
I think there's going back to that, there's a real human factor to this, and there is that thing of challenging what's your digital maturity, and that can be quite confronting for anyone. And even if we're talking about information, the way people manage information, and I think what we see across many businesses is there needs to be a bit of vulnerability there to just hold your hand up and say, I don't really understand what this data is, or I'm not confident in its provenance and its completeness. And I think I guess the digital era, people spoke a lot more and picked up the phone before we put anything in the post, and you made sure you're on the same page. So we've got, it's the soft skills for the future around making sure we communicate, and maybe I know we had discussions earlier as a group around the impact of COVID and things, but I feel we're all engaging a lot more in a different manner, in a digital fashion, connecting. But I still see that as so important. But also, as I say, when you talk supply chain partnering, when you form new teams the size of small businesses on major infrastructure projects, that's a real challenge. And it begs the question whether more focus and training and support's needed to help projects as organisation, project teams look at the communication skills, the soft skills, making it okay to put your hand up and say, haven't used this technology before, or I managed information completely differently before. Let's do some lessons learned, and it's putting all the effort up front around that, and then building those bonds. That's how you learn, by saying, this didn't work well last time. Should we try something new together? So I think there's such a human factor to all of this, as well as driving it from a purpose and outcome perspective. So that's kind of a shout out to say it's okay to not have all the answers. That's so important. And I think it's great that clients are making that, encouraging that. You look at the procurement process, it's actually still, in the 21st century, it's still very difficult potentially for suppliers to be, as long as there's no acid test for your level of information or data management, because clients are also tackling the challenges of, we've got to get our house fully in order to the point that we can provide information and data. So you're testing yourselves in your maturity of that, but also get a feel for that from your supply chain. So again, I don't think it should be straight to, let's raise the bar. It's let's work together. So I think that's got to be a critical part moving forward.
You're right. The commercial barriers that get put up in teams' ways, I think that's a massive thing that needs to be addressed. If we want to have these teams be successful and be empowered to do good things together, you can't do that while you're also arguing over $100 worth of variation here or this little piece of IP there. I think if we can start to take a bigger picture approach and go, so there's like the machine avoidance system that we've got running on the project. That's as an idea, that's there that any other supplier can come and put pieces together to make that system work. And I think it's got to be there for the betterment and the development of the industry as a whole. We got to stop working in this sort of zero-sum game arrangement. Otherwise, we're not really going to move forward. It will always sort of stifle us, just trying to run with a chain around your legs. So I think we have to be a bit more considerate about the procurement piece and the commercial engagement piece, and actually set ourselves up to deliver information to the right people and innovation in the right way.
At least up here in the Nordics, there's a real shift towards the alliance models, or the big room delivery projects, which you're starting to see more and more in New Zealand. There's still sort of a few here and there, but not at the scale that you're seeing up in this part of the world. So they were like, that was a real eye-opener for me to be involved with that, because it's like right from day one, you're chucked in a room with like the entire team that the clients provided, like your space, and you're all there, and it's like you're communicating from day one and sharing information on almost a daily basis with the engineers, with the client. And it was a lot of work, like, cause you always felt like you were missing deadlines, but it was like they could say, have you got the latest drawings? And you said, yeah, I sent them 2 days ago. They're like, they're not the latest. And it's like, they always want more information. And it was just the fact that you're trying to share information efficiently and regularly, so that you don't spend 2 months working on something to then have to completely rechange it and spend millions of dollars redoing it again. So it was just like this more iterative process and constantly testing things out. And that led to better design outcomes, in my opinion.
I like that. I like an idea that an alliance model maybe can be skinnied down, because that's one of the things we've seen on small projects. And you go, what I want is an alliance. What I don't want is have to set up an alliance. I want all the behaviors. So it's kind of, it would be nice to see the industry maybe develop some sort of way of incorporating the alliancing principles into the kind of business as usual, simple, small projects.
Yeah, definitely.
Carl, is that something that you're seeing and observing whilst you're on the other side of the world? Is it a lot more, because I wonder if alliance is a formal word for collaboration. Is that something where the industry is heading? Yeah,
for at least all like hospital projects here and airports and any larger projects that typically run that way. And just, the clients involved, all of the designers, and the risk is shared across them all. So, and it's also like just very regular information sharing. So having like the model sharing on a weekly basis, and and it's also about open standards as well, which I'm a big supporter of, and sharing information regardless of what tool you use, and sharing that amongst the whole team so that people can then use it for how they need to do it. So how they need to use it. So that's a big thing up here, is just that. I think it's a cultural thing of high level of trust, sharing information, and then working together to solve a problem. And there doesn't seem to be, there's not a lot of sort of big man arm wrestling going on. Of course, it still exists everywhere, but it doesn't seem that common.
I think a key trend on that, just to make a bit of a comparison, technology is an enabler. So technology alone won't get you the outcomes you need. But equally, in the contracting space, the alliance model won't deliver collaboration and positive outcomes. It's a model to leverage. So, alliancing perhaps hasn't been effective everywhere because you still need to engage and communicate and collaborate and land on common understand the needs of others. So these are all key enablers, and I think we have to take a holistic approach. A great outcome is you have enabling technology and data that's governed and owned and leveraged. And yes, you might have something called a digital twin, but it's all of those those other practice areas and using these things as enablers well. I think that's what industry's got to keep driving at.
I think your teams need to be sort of brave and mature enough to share their information, even if it's not perfect. That's probably one of the things is the sort of fear of it's not quite right. Let me just make it a little bit better, and then I'll share it with you. And helping people sort of realize that actually that's starting to become counterproductive here. If you want to collaborate, warts and all, I'm afraid.
And I think that's why I probably speak more around information management and data management, because it's that context.
Yeah.
Like, the metadata, the context, how good or reliable is this? Is still so important, and it always will be.
Yeah, and there's a question there around that technology is just an enabler from my perspective. This is from Johnny Presley, and it's about the well-being of our people and planet, and that's important. And I think, like, from working on these big room projects in hospitals, at the end of the day, it was about delivering better outcomes to people, because we had the nurses and the doctors every sort of week, or they could come to the big room to actually engage in the design and the future building that they were going to work in, because it isn't enough just to have the architects and engineers go, yeah, we know how to design a hospital, we'll deliver it, and then you turn up on day one and start working. It's like the other ones, they've got careers in their hospital. They're going to be potentially 20, 30 years working there. And you need to factor them into the actual whole process. And that's just around managing their information as well. What are their requirements, and documenting that so that the designers understand them, and then making sure that the design meets those requirements, then showing them proposals based on those requirements and saying, does this meet what you imagined you needed? And then does it meet the budgetary requirements? And it's then checking the model for like factoring all that in, and then checking it for sustainability purposes, and is the building good for the environment? So it's just bringing as many people into the project that need to be in it to deliver the outcome that you're after at the end. And a byproduct of that could be a digital twin, that you have the information in order and you can then use it for the next stage. But often it's just enough, like now, to get it to the point where we're actually delivering better buildings for people, so they can actually live healthily, go to work in a nice place. The building's not destroying the planet, and just those things that we all strive to want these days.
And connecting the data as well. Once you've got that data all nicely connected and freely accessible and democratized, I think we'll be pretty blown away with what people will then do with it. You kind of give them the information and the access, and let them have at it and see what they can do with it. That's one of the things that kind of excites me about this topic, probably, is I love the idea that somebody will come up with something very crafty based on a whole bunch of data sets we didn't really think about, but once they were connected, it unveiled a picture that we couldn't see before. Maybe that's about carbon emissions, or sort of an environmental outcome that we're kind of not quite nailing yet.
Yeah, and if the data sets exist, then it enables people to actually, software companies, to develop the tools to tap into that, or as you say, people to develop processes. So the more data we have, the more possibilities there are, and it's endless.
It's really interesting, because one of the questions that we were asking, before the session was, is a digital twin just a proxy for better data? But given that we've only got 5 or so minutes left in the session, I've made some really, really interesting observations as we've been talking this morning. And before I ask you to make some final comments, I'm going to read you these words that I wrote down. So in our conversations, we've talked about vulnerability, collaboration, value, enabling, and outcomes. And isn't that really interesting? And I wonder, just as a closing to the session, could these be actual indicators of progress towards digital twin maturity? And if they are, then what's next? Is that interesting?
I don't know how to reply to that.
Yeah. Do you think they might be measures of true progress? You know, because usually we talk about nuts and bolts. You know, can you put money into this investment, you come out with better data. It does this. Our models are better. It takes us to the next level. But are these actually the real measures?
Kerry, I think they have to be, but I think we mustn't fall into this. So experience on UK BIM level 2, having levels of maturity of the industry in shifting the conversation and lining up thinking and conversation, extremely powerful and successful and valuable. But I think we shouldn't get hung up on benchmarking against one business to another business, actually, because each business is still unique, even in the same sector, through legacy and through priority and focus and strategies and capability. I think that'd be much better measures if applied within the context of a business that makes up the built environment, as opposed to there are a set of industry measures and it's a race to the finish line. And I think that's where the continuous improvement piece really comes in. It's your own continuous improvement, and it's how you build and leverage what you're doing in that, the enabling technologies and collaborative working and information management. So.
Exactly, and like you understand your business, so it's like you are the one that actually is probably best to gauge that maturity. It's the same as a human, like how mature are you, Will? Like, what's your maturity rating? So it's like, I guess it depends who you hang around with, but it's the same thing with buildings or in the built environment. It's, in some buildings you might not need that much information. So therefore it could be actually very mature in that particular asset class, but then in others it's very complex. So you need a whole lot more information. So it's going to take more time, more effort and money to actually get to that point and reach that maturity. So
yeah, and you might have
to give a level.
Exactly, you might have a fantastically mature digital twin from a technology perspective, but the actual thing that you've created might be a really miserable environment for the people who are using it.
Yeah.
So is that a good outcome? Andy, there's a question specifically for you. I think we can't miss that.
Okay, no, I saw that. Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind just addressing it just in the closing comments. So, on your journey, lots to do, lots of exciting things to tackle. So, how does the asset management play fit into your roadmap?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's come about in our business is the asset management team and the digital engineering team sit very much hand in hand. So yeah, I would say digital engineering is probably an extension of the asset management team that just sits in the information piece. And the idea of Simon's question there around timeframes for asset management teams planning OpEx using models and things, I think maybe in sort of 3 to 5 years we'll start to have some elements of it. But that's it. What we're doing now is very much just a recognition of what we did 10 years ago wasn't quite good enough, and we need to be better for 10 years' time. So it is a bit of a long game. We're trying to build data sets of things that we're doing now so that in the future, probably the people that come in and replace us will be able to do something with it. So it's going to take a while. Especially before it's sort of endemic across the business. So we're thinking and working that way. But yeah, hopefully that's answered Simon's question. That's probably all we've got to say in it.
We've gone back to the main screen. So just in closing, final question, next steps for your organisations and for industry, where does your sort of immediate area of focus lie? One sentence. Andy, you can
I would say collaborating with other asset owners so that we can move a bit quicker, rather than just being the only ones learning the lessons.
Yeah, and for us at the airport, it's getting a good data set of our existing building while we can, because of the ease of construction work because of COVID. So it's getting that so we can then use that for our next projects and be better than we were prior to COVID.
For us, I'd say I quite echo the discussion yesterday with Central Digital Britain as well and today, but you know, help our clients, the asset owner operators who are so significant in making a big step change, help them explore what this means to their business, and not be led by technology, which you know, that's where a lot of the successes are coming from, and help them build on the early adoption. Again, you know, getting stuck into and getting moving with these things, helping build on that from a continuous improvement perspective. And we're very much doing the same for our own business in that role of an engineering consultancy as well. So it's yeah, working together to figure out what it means for our business and keep moving forward. So.
Brilliant. Thank you for those closing comments, and thank you all so much for joining this morning and answering some of my questions, and also for the good conversation. I think, you know, my reasons for inviting you to this session were that you're so passionate about the progression of the digital twins in your various organisations and the organisations that you work with, and I think you really conveyed that this morning. So thank you so much again, and back to you, Adam.
Kerry, thanks so much for facilitating that conversation, and Will and Andy and Carl. I was quite enjoying that, sitting back in the background, not having to do anything but listen in. It was fascinating. I feel like this could be sort of like a lounge room conversation we should have every month. You know, how are we going with our maturity? So I found the conversation just really authentic, really human. We didn't get too technical or detailed. And I've taken some fantastic quotes down here, and I've learned a lot as well. So thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, and thank you all. I just want to quickly address one of the questions that came through. Johnny's asked a question around smart cities and well-being, and the New Zealand Treasury Living Standard Framework, aligning KPIs and the work that's being done. Johnny, yes, there's great work being done. I'd refer you to Wellington City Council, who is doing some excellent work on that front, and Sean Ordain is the person you need to contact. So thank you for those that asked questions. It was a brilliant conversation, I must say. And Oricon, of course, as our co-host and a member of ours, thank you so much for pulling this panel together and contributing to the program of Digital Twin Week. A reminder, we've still got 3 other sessions today. And for those that want to roll up their sleeves, dig in more around some of these issues around maturity and standards, governance. We're going to be having that co-creation workshop tomorrow, working up the Australia-New Zealand digital twin strategy, which is under development at the moment. So please jump on the website digitaltwinweek.com to register for that. Finally, for those that are more sort of interested in the broader smart cities space, yesterday we announced and opened our 2020 Smart Cities Awards. Head to our website for Smart Cities Week, scwaustralia.com. You can download the submission guide there. You've got 2 weeks. There's sort of a streamlined award set of categories there. Encourage you very much to take a look at those. In a year of crisis, we certainly want to reward leadership. So looking forward to seeing the submissions that come through there. That's it from us at the Smart Cities Council, and this session for Digital Twin Week. As I mentioned, look forward to hopefully seeing you on a couple of other sessions soon. Another day and a half to go. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys.